that you had the big questions, not just the minor ones, like how do I form a society? What is a society? When does it all start? But you can't simply say you study law because of justice. Not Uzbekistan, most certainly not. Asking in Europe what is a human right and asking it over there in Asia, you would mean you get the same answer. You don't, not in real life. There is hope. As long as there is hope, you act. Uzbekistan, you know your rights already. So.
Welcome back, Mind Miners. Today we have a very special guest, a lawyer, a professor, all the way joining us from Austria, with her years of experience, not in only teaching, but in practicing law as well. She has been teaching us comparative law this week, and her unique practice comes from her career, balancing in both academia and legal field. We'll dive into her experience, insights on navigating bureaucracy, understanding law in a daily life, and her advice for young professionals. So let's get started.
Well, thanks for having me. A lot, actually. And yes, I'm open to answer any questions. So where should I start first with?
Well, could you tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, your education?
A lot of it. First advice, actually, already, yes, use your possibilities to study. I did, most certainly, in Austria. I actually started with a rather commercial background. So business administration was the first thing I started studying on a university for economics. But that was not enough because family background in my case, I always wanted to study law as well. So I did this as a second study program, the original law studies, so to say, in Austria, because we have some deviations as well where you specialize in one type of law, in one area of law. I did not. I made the entire legal studies program, which is basically a lot of history of law as well, the Roman legal part, and going through all the different areas, like company law, family law, criminal law, all things you might have and need to equip you to be whatever you want to be in the legal field. May it be a lawyer, maybe a judge, a consultant, whatever you can think of, basically. So those two studies influenced all my work experience because I always switch from one job area, so to say, to the other. Like starting finally then in my case was with the state attorney. So I was the one sitting accusing people on a bench, accusing people of criminal offenses, which was interesting, to say the least. But I couldn't do it forever. So pretty clear to me, if I did it forever, I would have lost hope in humanity all in itself. So I had to choose another job then after some time. Switching a bit to the other public law part where you have the administrative criminal field. So that was where I worked in, still in execution there. So the executive power. And then after some time, I was quite frankly bored. So that was not it. I needed a bit more creativity, a bit more areas to deal with than just administrative law. So I switched back to rather a commercial background and job and joined a private company. I mean, officially it's partly private owned as the government also holds a certain amount of shares in that company. But in that field, I worked in human resources. So labor law was the first specialization I got back to. But it was a nice mixture because, in human resources, you always have the business part as well, the people part, which is important, and then the legal aspects that are basically always there that you need. And then after 4 years, I switched to yet another area in that company, which was rather in the public procurement. So everything that has to do with tender procedures that normally people don't know what this is, but basically procuring huge public projects like a power plant, which is expensive and that cannot just be done. You need a procedure to follow. And that is what I put my legal advice in. And the other part lately is the sustainability, the entire ESG law that developed that was not there 10 years ago. And dealing with that and the reporting that you need to do, that you need to perform as a shareholder company. that is my everyday business nowadays.
Oh, yeah. Your
Yeah.
career must be very interesting.
Various aspects, at least, I did cover, indeed, yes.
Yeah. Why did you choose to become a lawyer? Was it your dream as a child? I mean, how did you find out that your passion is in legal field?
I mean, I was asked when I got my high school diploma, actually, the A levels that you have to have in a lot of countries to be allowed to study. There, I was asked by a teacher, what do you want to be in the future? And my pretty honest and straightforward answer was state attorney. So I kind of always knew I wanted to work in the legal profession as a legal professionalist, so to say. But I think my perspective changed a bit when studying law. The idea I at least had, and probably a lot of people have, of law was a lot different to what it actually is. And I can only stress to study a program, a legal program that is basically covering a lot of areas, because you can't just understand a specialization without having the basics included. That makes a huge difference. And for me, that was, for example, in law, that you talked about the history of law, that you learned about philosophy of law, that you had the big questions, not just the minor ones, like how do I form a society? What is a society? When does it all start? Which is always what I like to ask my students as well. But that is what I love about law. It's not a typical answer that you get like justice. That's why I studied law. That's why I work in that field. If you ever studied law, then you know that justice is a concept that is not always directly connected to law per se. You have so many aspects of law, like positive law, natural law, and justice is included somehow. But you can't simply say you study law because of justice.
Yes.
That's just one concept. Law is so much more than that. And it gives you so many different areas and fields that you could think of and work in. Guess that is a reason why as well. I like to think about big questions, so that is why I like law and why I studied it in the end, I think.
Okay. Then we move to the main questions. How important is it to know one's own rights? Why do people often overlook this?
I think you lose possibilities and you do not actually use all your potential that you have if you don't know what rights you actually have. And that starts in the very beginning. A lot of people have a lot of rights and don't know about them. And because of that, they are maybe mistreated. Because of that, maybe there is no justice. That absolutely might be. But to know what your rights are is the very beginning. One cannot ask for something if you don't know what your rights are. So being taught about it, learning about it, reading about it, being interested in what your rights are is quite essential for today's society. Because in the end, we always want, in a good society, as we say, people to be happy. If there is one strong party and one very weak party, one could assume the weak party is not so happy. If the weak party were to know what its own rights are, maybe it could do more. Maybe it wouldn't be so weak anymore. Maybe the entire society would change. So knowing your own rights is the very beginning. You cannot start without knowing what you are entitled to, which is a lot.
Can you share an example of when knowing your own rights made a big difference
In humankind or in my life?
in your life?
In my life, knowing my... Well, quite recently, actually, I see it a bit different, I think, as a lawyer, a legal consultant, you have a bit different understanding of what your rights are and when you need to know that. Because I see it on a daily basis, the importance of it. Coming from, I do get, I don't know, a letter or some fake information claiming something, and I just read it and know that can't be right because my rights are different. You cannot just ask me to do that, for example. Like, today's world, cyber criminality and all those stuff, and we just had this famous Black Friday weeks where basically you were spammed with a lot of advertising and a lot of information. And in between, obviously, all of us sometimes receive such nice alert messages and emails like, your bank account is now closed for good and you have to do this or that. If you know your rights, you know this cannot simply happen. So knowing that makes a bit of a difference in your life, most certainly.
Yes.
I mean, just one major impact it had, I couldn't think of it. It's my everyday life where it impacts me to know my rights. But I mean, I think you have to see the difference between living in a rather civilized country and living in a country that is still developing, because there it is most certainly showing a different impact. Knowing your rights there simply means surviving sometimes. That problem we don't have in the Western world at all. There it is another level. Doesn't mean it does not change your life, but maybe not to such a huge extent as it does in underdeveloped countries still.
Like Pakistan, developing country.
I would have thought of really underdeveloped countries like Democratic Republic of Congo and things like that.
Oh.
Really, really poor countries where you have a lot of people that struggle. And they, knowing their rights, that is quite essential there. Uzbekistan, you know your rights already. So there, I wouldn't say is such a big gap to the Western world. Not at all.
Oh, yeah.
You're studying. That is the beginning. You know your rights. I mean, think about that in Congo. Going to university? Going to a school, is even a big advantage already. So there is, unfortunately, worldwide a lot of difference still. And there it is. That's why it's interesting about human rights. To know your rights, how do you tell these people what their rights are? You have to use an entire different aspect to teach them, to tell them, to inform them, to get to them. That makes it interesting. But there is a lot of things to do for all of us that we sometimes forget about.
Oh, yeah. What advice would you give someone who feels their own rights have been violated?
Mhm.
What's the first step that they should take?
Well, if you know what your rights are, you typically also know how to start certain procedures. If you know what your rights are, you know that you can ask people, and that is always the first step, okay? If you don't have enough information on your own, at your own hand, get it. Get it by talking to people. People help each other more than you would assume normally. If you have some resources, if you can somehow get access to the internet, there's a lot of information, not always the right one. That is the challenge there, but it would help you already. And there are in all countries specialized organizations that can help you. Sometimes you just don't know about them, but reach out. Typical example is the United Nations. You find it worldwide, and they have subdivisions. They have a lot of information, and they have a lot of free support for people that have been violated. Get in contact. And in civilized countries, and that is a lot, including a lot of countries already worldwide, as soon as you have some kind of structure, organizational structure in a country, the authorities actually have to help you, have to support you. Not saying that there is no wrongdoing around the world. There is enough. So if you feel authorities have violated your rights, that happens a lot as well, my advice would be look for NGOs. They do a lot of good work. And at least they have the connections to get you to someone that can really help you. And obviously, yes, typically you say lawyers can help you then. Lawyers don't come for free. We all know that. Exactly. But NGOs have good associations with them. Sometimes they do something pro bono, and the NGOs know about it. So talk to people. Don't be afraid. Reach out and ask NGOs if you have some close by, or ask if people know of NGOs in whatever area you've been violated. And the United Nations typically have good connections to the NGOs. So either they bring you to the United Nations, or you have a local office of the United Nations. They are connected as well. It doesn't have to be in the area where you've been violated.
Oh, yeah.
They can connect you to the right department. And they are typically, the people working there, the employees, are motivated to do so.
Now, they know that they don't have only one place to address when they feel their rights are violated. Yeah.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
The question is to find the right one. That is the challenge then.
Yeah.
But you have to start somewhere. If you don't start, nothing's going to change. Okay. So don't just swallow it up, so to say. Don't accept that your rights have been violated, because then nothing's going to change.
Yes, exactly. At this point, I think it would be better if we mention to our audience what NGO stand for?
Non-governmental organizations. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, so basically, if it's not driven and owned by a government, but having its other ulterior motives, which are depending on the NGO, for example, it might be the environment, it might be human rights. Okay, they are specialized in something, and the important part is they do not do what they do to earn money, but rather to fulfill their purpose. So there is even a limit on how much money they can earn with doing what they do. And typically they just have sponsors that fund them so that they can give advice to you freely. That doesn't cost anything. That is what NGOs do.
Oh yeah. The next question: are there common mistakes that people do while dealing with legal issues, and how can they avoid them? What are the most typical mistakes that they do?
When dealing with law altogether,
Yes.
typically, first thing that comes to my mind is not being informed about it.
Oh yeah.
You often misbehave, let's put it like this, because you are not informed. And that often is connected to not being interested in it, because we all know the general, no, we probably don't, but I know it, and I try that all my students know it. The general rule in law worldwide is ignorance is no excuse.
Yes.
So just because you're not interested in what the legal provision tells you is, it doesn't change the fact that you have to apply it. So one common error is, you don't have enough interest in it.
Oh yeah.
And actually, if you really think about it, I don't understand why not. I mean, I know all the arguments. It's written in a style that is boring, that no one understands. This is too complicated. My typical answer is, it is just words. If you can't read words and comprehend words, then you cannot communicate. I don't believe that. I mean, in some areas of the world, not Uzbekistan, most certainly not. In some areas of the world, maybe the people are not taught what a word means.
Oh yeah.
But in Uzbekistan, you know that, for example. So your audience should know that. You can read, and as long as you can read, you can also read a legal provision.
Yes, exactly.
So you could only then argue, boring. Well, we just talked about knowing your rights. So is it boring to know what your rights are?
No.
Hopefully not.
So it can't be excuse.
It can't be an excuse for that. Yeah. No, take a look into it. And if it is tiresome, yes, then make a break, but read through it. Know your fundamental rights. You don't have to go in details. You can always take a look back later on those details. But in the beginning, focus on the basics. Be interested in that. Why am I allowed to drive a car? Why am I allowed to go to a school? Am I actually? Am I just doing it because my parents tell me so? Ask yourself those questions, and then the law will not be just your enemy or something, and you won't make so many mistakes, because there is no mistake that you cannot redo when it comes to law, as long as you're interested in it.
Yeah. You worked in different legal systems.
Mm.
What's one big difference you have noticed?
Well, the legal systems try to organize a society. Let's put it this way, okay? It's basically the way people want to live together in its most basic sense is what you find in a law system. So depending on where you are, what culture is there, what society is there, what rules of society are there, the law is different. So you do recognize a lot of differences depending on the areas, mostly a bit driven by history, obviously. You know that, for example, Australia is somehow comparable to the United Kingdom in parts of their legal tradition because of their shared history and their shared values that they brought over there. So you see similarities when it comes to that. You also see a lot of differences. For example, if you compare Europe and the legal systems of Europe, which are pretty much similar to each other, not entirely, but pretty much, and compare it to Asia, for example, asking in Europe what is a human right and asking it over there in Asia, you would mean you get the same answer. You don't. Yes. Not in real life. You don't. There's different values and different priorities as to what is important and what's not. And also then what is a certain right and what not, which is absolutely a valid point. As I said, the law is not the enemy of the people. It just basically is a picture of what they feel and what their values are. So obviously there is a difference then. And for the one nation, country, region, at least it should be their values that are in the system. And you cannot put other values on top of that. That would be the wrong thing to do. So my experience is when traveling from one country to the other and living in different legal systems, accept it. Don't start being a missionary and telling them what is the better system. No, for you it might be in your country, but not for them. Listen to them, accept it, because that is the culture and tradition there. Not saying if something is absolutely unjust, as many like to say, for the majority of people, that you should just not say anything. No, but don't start to change something that has a reason why it is the way it is.
Okay. I've been asking a lot of questions non-stop.
It's okay. That's what
okay?
this is for. Indeed.
Let's take a sip of water.
We can do that as well. Anything else you would like to cover as a
Yeah.
main point?
What do you enjoy the most about being a lawyer? Is it solving problems or helping people? We got back to your career. The questions.
We've been upholding the legal tradition. Seems a bit sophisticated, maybe. Helping people. Well, yeah, I think the law always helps the people. It should, at least, to some extent. If that is my motivator number one, I don't think so. Actually, I like seeing a good running system. I like seeing that if people need something, you can make it happen in a very perfect way with a certain legal system. That is what motivates me. So when reading through a legal provision, I don't just read the words. I typically always try to understand the entire meaning. You know, in law, we have something that is being called interpretation of law because it's not always clear in one line. No, it mostly is not, actually. So you start interpreting it. And even for that, a lot of people have thought about how to do that. You can only ask yourself, what is the word, meaning of the word? You can ask yourself, okay, the word is the third word in a line. Does that mean something because of it being the third one and not the last one and not the first one? You can ask yourself then, okay, the entire provision, it's in the beginning of a legal textbook. Maybe that should tell us something. Maybe that's why it has higher priority or not. Questions like that. And finally, ask yourself, when the legislative power came up with a new rule, why did they do it? Is there some history about it? Can you read the minutes, for example? Is there some movement in society that's what they actually wanted to make sure? Because that's what helps then. So understanding the bigger picture is basically what drives me as a lawyer.
What do you think is the most important skill for someone who wants to be a lawyer? Or what skills should they be shaping?
Patience.
If they...
Yeah. But what other skills should they be shaping is your question. Well, patience, because to study law takes time. It doesn't make sense to go through that in 2 years. None at all. You won't understand the entire bigger concept about it. You won't. When performing law, being patient is important because just forming your own opinion is nice. You don't have to study law for that. Not at all. Studying law, performing law changes you as a person because what you do typically, should do, hopefully all lawyers do, at least if they're honest lawyers, listen to all sides. Hear all remarks, all of them, not two that you like to hear, and then decide, not before that. And if you have the feeling you didn't have all the facts, don't decide. That's what I mean with being patient. It might take time. It might not be now. And in today's world, in today's economy, what happens typically if you work in the private area rather for a company? Time is money.
Yes.
I need a decision now. Short. One sentence, one line even. I heard that thousands of times in my career. But the typical answer is, if I give you one line, you won't have the entire answer. You can take it. I can guarantee there's going to be a lot of liability included for you. A lot of it. Take your time. I take mine as well. Because if I decide without knowing all the facts, it will be one-sided. I most certainly am sure it's not going to be fair. So patience is one of the skills. skill is maybe the wrong word. It's a virtue that you need to perform there, that you need to have and master. Skills, logic, thinking logically, that is something you have to get used to. When reading, comprehending what the sense is behind a line. When reading long texts, getting to the key points faster. That is skills you need to learn. Arguing. Some people don't like to do it at all because it means getting out there, telling what you think, why you think it, deciding it. That is something you need to get used to. I know that people often say lawyers or jurists or professionals in that area, they don't decide. They give us thousands of papers, but an answer is not included.
Oh, yeah.
Saying that means you haven't read it. Actually, that is my answer to that, because there is an answer included. Because what a lawyer can do is decide, and you can trust on that. They decide. They hear all sides. They argue all sides. But in the end, they will decide. They know for their own what they think is the right answer, and they decide. And that is something people sometimes don't like, because if you decide, you have to take the responsibility as well. You have to live with the consequences. And that is not always easy. So being able to decide finally is something you have to get used to. So patience is a virtue. Being able to read and understand the comprehensive meaning of something. Being able to argue, to decide finally. That is what you need to get used to.
The skills we counted right now was, most of them was soft skills. And what about the hard skills that they should be working on?
I think it is rather about the soft skills, actually. There isn't so many hard skills. The legal studies per se, if you study it, they give you tools that you can use. That is the hard skills. After having those tools, you're not a lawyer. Not at all.
Oh.
The studies itself change you as a person. They support you in getting the soft skills. The tool set you can get on your own. You don't need legal studies for that. Read the textbook. Then you know how to interpret a law. Just a tool set. Hard skills. The soft skills are the ones that make the difference.
Oh, yeah. When I was preparing for university, when I was choosing my major, I was considering becoming a lawyer. And the university requirements, like exams, were from history, mother tongue, then like literature. It was.
I mean, it can help. Okay, let's put it this way: to say this needs to be a requirement. I typically always stress the fact that you need to know what words mean in order to communicate. A legal system of society doesn't work if we can't communicate. So, to prove that as a hard skill, that you have a certain level of a language, it doesn't, depending on what country you study in. Obviously, mother tongue typically comes then, but you could study in another country as well, then you need another language. But having a certain level to be able to understand what someone is teaching you makes sense, most certainly. That is something I would assume, actually. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The other things, literature. Ooh. I mean, if you read a lot of literature, it might have broadened your horizon, as it tells typically. Literature per se is not always connected to law. One area of legal studies can be, isn't always, but can be philosophy of law. Obviously, if you read a lot of literature, it leads you in that direction. Not exclusively, but it could put you onto that course, which is not a bad thing, because all the big philosophy books that you might find tell you something about the bigger picture. It's not you the first person thinking of that. A lot of people have. So use what they have thought about and go further. Expand your own horizon. Ask yourself all the time. Always challenge yourself. So having literature as one requirement, I would not support it as strongly as the language and the tongue that you mentioned. And what was the last one you mentioned? History. Well, we should learn from history. I always, stress you in doing that.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it, because as I mentioned, things happened already. If you know what happened, it would be stupid, actually, to not ask yourself, can we not improve it? just have to take a look at it, and I could already improve it. Why not do it if it would be better then? So knowing history makes sense. If you have not learned it already, you should do it when studying it, because you will understand the concepts a lot better. So I would say it supports it. I would never ever stop someone from studying law when not having learned history before, because you can always do it alongside. By learning something about Roman law, you learn something about Roman history.
Yes.
So just having some kind of, I don't know, certificate that tells me you had history. As a teacher, it doesn't tell me if you heard anything about Roman law and Roman history and society, about republic, about senate. So what does a certificate then help me if I read you had one before you studied law? So
Yeah.
some things I totally support. Some things I say you could also do alongside studying.
So being a lawyer is more about like qualities, not about the knowledge, right? As you said.
Knowledge, you can always gain knowledge. You can
Yeah.
always read something. That's the thing you understand when studying law. Also, people often like to say, yeah, the textbook, the law book, they can tell you every line about it. They know it by heart. That's not true. We don't. We know the core principles, which is way more important, actually. We know how to interpret a law. We know that a general rule would be this, and then we can make a deep dive. We know where to look, which is important. And that is why in the beginning, in many legal study programs, you learn the core values, the core principles that you find worldwide, comparative law. What do we have on the entire world? That's what you learn. That's what you should memorize. That's what you should know by heart. But then later on, they will never ask you to know something by heart. They rather tell you, this is the facts, solve it. Whatever you need to solve it, use it. That may be that textbook, that may be that law book, that may be that review that you read somewhere. I don't care. Solve it.
Yeah.
That is what they do then. And that is the tool set you get when studying law. There is facts, there is a huge problem. Do something. No one's going to tell you how to do it. No one. Be not dependent on others. Be
Yeah.
a problem solver. And don't be afraid of it. There's problems where you think in the first moment, no idea. This is too big. I can't do it on my own. Okay, if that is the case, find someone else to support you. But don't just stand there frozen, not acting.
Yeah. So they shouldn't give up.
You never should. I mean, if a human being gives up, loses hope, I think you stop existing, actually. That is the one thing that human beings have. There is hope. As long as there is hope, you act. If you lose that, there is nothing left for you.
Oh yeah.
But we're coming to philosophy again. It always centers back to that, indeed.
Yeah.
Which is why, actually, in former times, philosophy and law was one study.
Oh yeah, in
There's reasons
Athens
for
and
it.
Greece. Yeah.
Indeed. It is connected. Can't separate it, actually. And it is a mistake to do it all the time. Because you lose the core.
Oh yeah. So the core of the law is philosophy.
It comes from philosophy. Not saying that on an everyday base, you can stand on the street and proclaim all the different studies you heard. That doesn't solve the problems then. But having understood certain concepts and asking yourself all the time, what does it mean? Can I apply it? Helps you as a human being to solve things, to have another perspective, which then brings you to a solution. So it's always there in the back of your mind. That is why it is important. And that is, you could say, soft skills. Maybe then it is even hard skills if you know about these studies. But you won't forget it. And that is it. It influences the way you act.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I mean, you can have another opinion. I accept that. This is just what I
No, like
experienced.
yeah, it was a good example actually.
Okay. That is that. Open-minded.
Yeah, sure. What was one of the most challenging cases that you worked on, and how did you solve it? And did it teach you something that you still use today?
Depends on what area I worked in, actually. I had cases that changed me in so far that I would have never expected something like that to happen. If it helped me in solving cases, I think it changed my perspective a lot. It happened rather early in my career when I was still with the state attorney, and you experience the worst of humankind there. You heard about it, you read about it, you saw movies. You would not expect this to be happening so close to you. Because typically you think, yeah, somewhere around the world we all know that happens. But not my neighbor. Nah, that's too close by. No, it's not. Absolutely not. So that's changed my perspective. And for me, for example, hearing a child talking in an absolute neutral way about something that happened to the child, that changes you. It really does. Because a normal human being, not a psychopath, obviously, but a normal human being shows some kind of emotion. They don't. None at all. It's as if they talk about themselves in the third person. But it is something really severe that happened to children. So listening to that and dealing with that, and at the same time, yes, the children are the victims, but the one that did something to them, the bad guy in the story, so to say, also has certain rights in a civilized tradition and legal tradition system. So you can't just go there and be subjective and, well, say, okay, you're the bad guy, forget about it. Whatever you want to say, I'm not going to listen anymore. I hurt children.
Oh, yeah.
You can't do that. You still have to face that person, be objective as far as it goes, because you're a human being. Accept what that person says as well, because it has rights. The person has rights.
Yeah.
And then you have to decide finally, considering all the facts. But it changes you. If it helped me, I think even more, it made me realize there I have to listen to both sides.
Yeah.
You can't base
coin
your
has two
decision
sides.
on one side only. Can't. And listen. Be open to all you hear and see.
Oh, yeah. What's one thing you wish more people understood about the law?
It's not your enemy. It's not something that is tiresome. Law is there to support you. Law is your societal life. So I would wish for more people to understand what law is, why we have it. Not like it's a lot of bureaucracy, like you hear it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
That is not law. That is what we made out of certain things. That is not law per se. Law is not textbooks. Law is forming the society.
Yeah, it's our daily life.
It is our daily life. It's everywhere. That's why I always stress, when did you get your first rights? Do you have rights?
Oh, yeah.
You're born. No, actually, even before that, you have rights. So
Oh, yeah.
that
Sorry.
is also law. It's not about paperwork in that moment of time. Not at all. And if you start thinking about why did it all start, how did it start, with a so-called thing like societal contract, very, very, very early, before we had any writing and reading possibilities and skills, we already had that. It's just our society, the way that people, as soon as you have two of them, exist. You have law. And that's what they should understand. That's what I would wish for.
Oh, yeah. Is there a small change people can make in their lives to stay legally safe?
Knowing your rights.
Knowing.
If it's small, I don't know. Being interested.
At least staying
Open.
updated, right?
Updated, yes. Read things. Hear what people say. See things, okay? So be open-minded. You get a lot more information there. And by being open-minded, you get to know your rights as well. So that is the small step. Like, there is another person crossing you on street. Take a look at that person. Don't ignore it.
Yeah, why is crossing?
For example, yeah. So there's many people running around just looking, I don't know, at the street and not at other people that are bypassing. Or even worse than if someone asks you something and you're like, "Hi, I'm not here. I didn't hear him."
Oh, yeah.
Why? Maybe you could have learned something. Not saying you have to talk to everyone. Yes, could be a lot, but Just be open, not so closed in a nutshell. Expand your horizon. That is easy because it's the only thing you have to do. You don't need anyone else for changing. Just you on your own. Do it.
Oh, yeah. And finally, what advice would you give to young people who want to succeed in their careers, not only in law, but in any? Uh, is there a mindset or daily habit you recommend?
Stay true to yourself. Seems quite abstract, but choosing some studies, profession, education that you don't really like is not a good idea. Yes, it might be that your parents, your friends, your life, your society tells you to do so. In the end, you're not really going to be happy. Never. You might even perform it until you die, not being entirely happy, because I think you can do so much more. You have so much potential, but you only can use it if you really want to do it. So if you don't want to do it, stick to your opinion, raise it, say it, change it, no matter in what step of your studies and education you are. Be true to yourself. That you can be.
Oh, yeah. The last question. What life philosophy do you live with?
That changed a lot over the years, actually. I think right now,
you're staying updated, as you say, changing.
yeah, probably being open-minded.
Yeah.
I think lately, but it also came from my daily life nowadays, is carpe diem, and that sounds stupid because a lot of people say that. Make use of your day, do the most of it that is possible, because there is only one moment of time. It's not going to repeat. And later on, you're always going to regret not having used it. So in that very moment, be in that moment, not in the future, not in the past, be in that moment. That is, as of now, my philosophy, which is hard enough to
The ladies'
keep.
philosophy you're living with. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you very much. It was really honor to have you in our podcast.
My very
Hope
much.
to see you in our next episodes as well. I think our interview will find the right audience who really need that, who benefits from it.
Hopefully. And as I said, information is key. So as many people as hear it, they might start changing. So the more the better. And always happy to discuss things. Said, I'm happy if someone comes and challenges me. There is no wrong and right normally. So
Oh, yeah.
do on with that. Get people informed. Invite them from different fields, because I think it helps the entire audience hearing different perspectives, broadening their horizon.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.